I stood by the table, holding the knife for the fish. The glass plate still gleamed with grease. The aroma of baked salmon hung in the air. And then, I saw my son Michael, without lifting his eyes, placing the best pieces of fish into a plastic container. Beside him stood his wife, Hannah, holding the lids. Her mother, Patricia, leaned toward him and whispered, "Take as much as you can." Hannah smirked and added louder, making sure I could hear, "Mom always cooks too much." My own son was helping rob my table. I froze, as if all the air had been drained from the room. On the tablecloth lay the reckoning of my effort. $47. $80 for fresh salmon, $26. $40 for vegetables, $18. $50 for bread and butter. Altogether, $230. A week of preparation, dozens of hours at the stove. But it was not about the money. It was about the fact that Michael did not even look at me as he snapped the lid shut. In that moment I heard a crack. Not from the container, but from something inside me. I pushed my chair back and said, "Leave the food where it is." They exchanged glances and Patricia smiled coldly. "Linda, do not start. You will not eat it anyway. And the young ones will be glad of it." And then I said, "Get out. Right now." Silence settled over the table. Michael lifted his eyes for just a second. There was no remorse in them, no surprise. Only the weary acceptance that his mother was a resource to be stripped. It was a blow I will never forget. I had invested $230 and an entire week of preparation into this celebration. Every receipt still lay folded in my kitchen drawer. $47. $80 for fresh salmon from the market, $26. $40 for herbs and vegetables, $89. $00 for wine and soft drinks, and the rest for bread, butter, and dessert. The bills were exact, but the true cost could never be measured in numbers. It was never just about money. I had invested 30 years of my life into my son. 30 years of rising at dawn to pack his lunches, of sleepless nights at his bedside when he had fevers, of working double shifts to pay for his language courses. I had once sold my mother's wedding ring, thin gold with a small diamond, for $450, just to help cover the last installment of his wedding venue. I told myself it was worth it, that sacrifice was the nature of motherhood. And in return, emptiness. I remembered the little jabs I had endured before, things I had brushed aside as harmless. The soup is too salty. The flowers look wilted. The tablecloth is old. Each remark had landed like a pinprick, sharp but survivable. I smoothed over those moments with smiles, telling myself he was stressed, that Hannah was young and did not know better, that Patricia had her own ways. But now, standing in front of my half-stripped table, I saw them for what they were: warnings. The collapse had been coming for a long time. The loneliness struck hardest after they left. The kitchen, once full of voices, fell silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. The fish bones, the half-empty wine glasses, the crumbs on the tablecloth, all seemed to sneer at me. I washed each plate slowly, as if scrubbing away the humiliation, but the feeling clung to my skin. I sat by the window long after midnight, my ledger open on the table. The numbers stared back at me. Pension, groceries, utilities, and the column labeled Michael. Every month for years I had written sums in that column. $300 for rent once, $180 for a car repair, $95 for school fees, $60 for gas. The total over the years, $24,730, was underlined in red ink. Money that could have gone to a safer house, to medicine, or to a quiet trip I had always dreamed of. Instead, it was gone, poured into a well with no bottom. I thought of the friends I had lost along the way. Joanne had stopped inviting me to her weekly card games because I always said I was too busy or too tired. Truthfully, I was too ashamed to admit I had spent my money elsewhere. My neighbor Carla had once asked me to come along on a short bus trip to the mountains. I said no because Michael had needed help that week. One by one the invitations stopped. My life had narrowed until all that remained was my son's endless needs. That night sleep did not come. I lay awake replaying Michael's words at the table. Mom always cooks too much. It was not just about food. It was about my years, my sacrifices, my presence. To him, everything I gave was excessive, disposable, something to be packed away in containers and carried out the door. The street outside my window was dark, quiet, but inside me there was noise, memories, regrets, numbers, and the unshakable realization that love, given without boundaries, had turned me into nothing more than a resource to be plundered. A few days after I had thrown them out with the words, "Get out right now," the phone rang. The caller ID showed Michael's number, but it was Hannah's voice that greeted me. "Linda, we went too far. But we are struggling. We need help. You have always supported us." Her tone was soft, almost sweet, rehearsed like a lullaby meant to soothe a restless child. But beneath it, I heard only cold calculation. I pictured her sitting in their living room, Patricia close by, signaling what to say, while Michael remained silent as always. I let her words settle. She spoke of overdue bills, of grocery shortages, of needing just a little help until things get better. She reminded me of the $600 I had lent them last year for a temporary emergency, of the $120 I had given her for dental care. She used those past sacrifices as proof that I could, and should, give again. The irony was unbearable. The same people who had carried my food away in plastic containers were now asking for my money. The same hands that scooped the best fish off my table now reached for my wallet. I stared at the phone in silence, the weight of 30 years pressing on my chest. For years I had trained myself to respond instantly, to smooth over crises, to rescue. But that day, I did not answer her plea. I simply said, "No," and hung up. The phone rang again and again, but I let it buzz on the counter. Each vibration was like a drumbeat of their entitlement, but also a reminder of something shifting inside me. Later that evening, Michael sent a message. "Mom, we are sorry. We should not have taken so much food. But Hannah is right, we really do need help. Please think of Sophia." He used the name of their daughter like a key to my heart, as if a child's existence meant I should continue erasing myself. I closed the message without replying. I had seen enough. Their voices were no longer the cries of family in need. They were the demands of people who believed my love was a permanent credit line. I closed my eyes and felt a strange calm spread through me. It was not anger, not even sorrow, just clarity, like a window suddenly cleaned after years of dust. I had always forgiven, always justified. Michael was tired, Hannah was young, Patricia was old. I had built excuses the way other women built fences, except mine kept no one out. But that night, sitting at my kitchen table with the ledger still open, I saw everything differently. Every line in the column marked Michael was a piece of me surrendered. The $450 for his wedding deposit. The $310 for their broken refrigerator. The countless grocery bags I carried up their stairs while they laughed and left wrappers on the couch. I had erased myself in ink, bill by bill. If I gave in one more time, if I let them twist my guilt and love into obedience again, they would erase me completely. I would no longer be Linda, mother and woman, but only an open hand with money folded into it. I whispered aloud, almost afraid of my own voice. They no longer control my life. The words did not tremble. They stood firm like stones placed carefully in the foundation of a wall. I looked around my kitchen, the same kitchen where I had cooked thousands of meals, where I had wept over unpaid bills and reheated soup for Michael when he was small. For the first time it felt like my space, not theirs. The air was mine, the silence was mine. From this day on the rules were mine. No more hidden transfers. No more rushed payments just until payday. No more selling heirlooms to cover their wants. My money, my home, my dignity off the table. One evening, just as the sun was sliding behind the rooftops and painting the sky a heavy orange, my sister Joan came over. She did not call ahead. She rarely did when something serious was at stake. She stepped into my kitchen with her coat still on, her face tight, her lips pressed thin. Without a word, she placed a plain white envelope on the table between us. It looked ordinary, but I could see the weight in her eyes. "Read it," she said. I sat down, my hands unsteady. Inside were printed pages, black and white, but the words leapt out at me like poison. Messages. A thread of conversations between Hannah and Patricia, which Joanne had obtained through a mutual contact. The first line was enough to make my stomach turn. "Linda will have tons of food. Bring as many containers as possible. She is old, she will not eat it anyway." The next message came from Patricia. "Make sure Michael distracts her while we pack. We should not leave leftovers behind. Everything must be taken. She is foolish enough to think it is kindness." And another, sent just a day before the celebration. We also need to figure out how to make her look guilty so no one feels sorry for her. If she complains, just say she is confused. People already believe it. I read them twice, then a third time, my throat tightening until I could hardly breathe. It was no longer gossip. No longer subtle slights. This was their strategy in black and white, premeditated, deliberate, cold. I looked up at Joanne, who was watching me closely. "Where did you get these?" I asked. "A friend of a friend," she said carefully. "Someone who does not like what Hannah and Patricia have been doing. They passed these along, and when I saw your name, I knew you had to see." I pressed the papers flat on the table with my palm, as if to keep them from flying away. The evidence felt heavier than stone. Every suspicion I had swallowed for months, every humiliation I had tried to excuse, was here, undeniable. For a long while, neither of us spoke. The refrigerator hummed, the clock ticked, and the sky outside darkened. Finally, Joanne broke the silence. "Linda, this is not just disrespect. This is cruelty. They are trying to ruin you, to make you look weak so they can take more." I nodded slowly. My mind was racing through years of moments, piecing them together like shards of broken glass. The smirks at my table, the whispers behind my back, the sudden concern from neighbors about my confusion, the way Michael had said, "You keep track of everything, that is not normal." They had been planting this narrative all along, and now I could see the outline of their plan. That night I did not sleep. I spread the pages across my dining table like a case file, reading and rereading them, marking dates, tracing their schemes. One message from Hannah made bile rise in my throat. "If she refuses money, we will say she is unstable. No one will believe an old woman over a young family with a child." A young family with a child. My granddaughter, Sophia, was nothing but a pawn in their game. The betrayal cut deeper than any insult. I remembered the nights I had rocked Michael to sleep, his fever burning, whispering promises that I would always be there for him. I remembered standing in the rain outside a pawn shop after selling my mother's wedding ring, clutching the bills that would secure his wedding payment. I remembered years of dinners where I ate beans and rice so he could attend courses, believing I was building his future. And this was the return. A conspiracy to paint me as mad, to strip my dignity and reduce me to an obstacle. The following morning I made copies of the messages. Not just one set, 5 sets. I placed them in different folders, sealed in plastic sleeves. One I hid in my desk drawer, another in my safe, another with Joanne, another inside a book in my living room. If they wanted to call me confused, let them try. I had evidence layered like armor. The pressure from outside did not stop. That week alone, 3 different people approached me with pitying eyes. "Linda, maybe you should not handle everything on your own. Maybe let Michael help." Each time I smiled faintly and said nothing. They were repeating what Hannah and Patricia had planted. But I no longer felt cornered. I had the truth in my hands. On Thursday, Michael appeared at my door again. His face was tired, but his tone was sharper. "Mom, why are you being like this? Hannah says you are telling people lies about her. Do you know how much damage you are doing to our family?" I let him speak, let him pour out the rehearsed lines. When he finally paused, I opened my drawer and slid one of the copies across the table toward him. He looked down, his eyes skimming the words. His face drained of color. His lips parted, but no sound came. "Is this a lie too?" I asked evenly. He pushed the paper back, refusing to meet my gaze. "You do not understand." "I understand perfectly," I said. "Better than you think." He left without another word, but the tremor in his hands told me the ground beneath him had shifted. That evening Joanne called. "What will you do with the evidence?" "Wait," I said. My voice was calm, colder than I expected. "There will come a moment. And when it comes, they will not be able to deny it." I hung up and turned toward the quiet kitchen. The papers were still spread on the table, waiting like silent witnesses. For years they had stolen my food, my money, my peace. Now, at last, I had something that could not be erased by lies. The day of reckoning was drawing close. Hannah's aunt turned 60 on Saturday, June 7, 2025. The invitation said 6 p.m. Community Hall on Birch Street, potluck style. Bring containers for leftovers. I read that last line twice. I folded the invitation, slid it into my purse, and added the envelope of printouts. I left the house at 5:35 p.m. with my ledger, a pen, and the quiet in my chest that comes before a decision is carried out. The hall smelled of dill, coffee, and floor wax. Tables lined the walls with trays of chicken, salads, and cakes. Hannah waved as if nothing were wrong. Patricia stood behind her, already stacking a nest of plastic containers on a chair. Michael hovered near the drinks, hands in his pockets. He did not meet my eyes. At 6:40 p.m. after the toast, Hannah took out a roll of labels. Patricia opened the first container with a snap. "We should get this packed before it spoils," Patricia said to the room, friendly and brisk. No one objected. I watched 1 minute, then 2. Someone laughed. A cousin held a lid. The ease of it was a lesson. Some habits become furniture. People stop seeing them. I stepped forward. "Stop," I said, and my voice carried. "Before you start packing, there is something everyone should read." Chairs scraped. A few heads turned. Patricia kept her hand on the container like a shopkeeper on a till. I set the envelope on the center table and took out the pages. They were printed on standard white paper, 12-point font, dates and times visible at the top of each message thread. I placed the stack in full view and spoke clearly. "Do you know what they write to each other? That my celebrations are a free store, and that I am just a foolish old woman they can easily blame." I lifted the first page and read without raising my voice. May 30th, 2025, 8:12 p.m. Hannah, Linda will have tons of food. Bring as many containers as possible. She is old, she will not eat it anyway. May 31st, 2025, 10:04 a.m. Patricia, make sure Michael distracts her while we pack. We should not leave leftovers behind. Everything must be taken. She is foolish enough to think it is kindness. I laid the page down. The room went quiet except for the hum of the soda machine. Someone coughed. Patricia's hand left the container. Hannah's smile thinned. "That is private," she said. "It is taken out of context." "Here is the context," I replied, sliding the next page forward. June 2nd, 2025, 7:51 p.m. Hannah, if she refuses money, we will say she is unstable. No one will believe an old woman over a young family with a child. June 3rd, 2025, 9:13 a.m. Patricia, we also need to figure out how to make her look guilty so no one feels sorry for her. A murmur moved through the room like a draft. 2 of Hannah's cousins scanned the lines, their fingers following the dates. An uncle shook his head. A niece looked at Hannah and then at the pages again. Patricia recovered first. "Fake," she snapped. "Anyone can print lies." I took the top 3 pages, flipped them over, and pointed to the tiny numbers I had circled in blue ink. Message IDs, timestamps, and the header with the last 4 digits of your number. I brought 5 sets. 1 is already with my sister. 1 is with my lawyer. If you would like to challenge their authenticity, do so in writing, but not with containers in your hands. Hannah reached for Michael's arm. "Say something," she whispered. "This is your mother." He stared at the papers as if they were a mirror he did not want to stand before. I kept my voice steady. "Michael, if you stay silent again, you are no longer my son." The words were plain. I did not raise them like a threat. I laid them down like a document to be signed. He flinched. A glass somewhere clicked against a plate. Patricia tried a different route. "Linda, you know how text can sound. We are family. Surely you would not tear your family apart over a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding is when someone takes a cookie by mistake," I said. "This is planning. This is motive." I opened my ledger on the table and turned it toward the room. Red underlines marked the totals. 30 years of support. $24,730 recorded, not counting groceries and cash gifts. On May 31st, I spent $230 on the celebration you see in those messages. On June 1st, I received 3 phone calls implying I am confused and unwell. That is not a misunderstanding. That is a campaign. Hannah laughed once, brittle. "Listen to her. She is making lists like a prosecutor." "Correct," I said. "I am presenting facts. My money is off the table." The sentence landed the way a door closes. Final, ordinary, and impossible to argue with. Aunt Martha, the birthday woman, stepped closer, her party sash slightly crooked. She looked at the pages, then at Hannah. "Is this how you speak about elders?" she asked quietly. Hannah lifted her chin. "We were joking. Everyone jokes." Martha turned to Patricia. "And you?" Patricia folded her arms. "It is none of your business." "It became my business the moment you told everyone to bring containers," I said. "It became my business when you labeled me confused to cover your taking." Hannah's cousin Nora held up her phone. "Hannah, these are your messages. The times match when you were texting me about the menu." Hannah's mouth opened then closed. She reached for the stack. I placed my hand over it. "Do not touch them," I said. "They are evidence." Michael finally spoke, his voice low. "Mom, you did not have to do this here." "Here is exactly where I needed to do it," I answered. "Because the lies were public. The smirks were public. The containers were always public." He glanced at Hannah. She searched his face for loyalty. Patricia pressed her lips into a line. Around us, the room stayed still, chairs anchored by the weight of listening. Hannah changed tactics again. "You are jealous," she said softly, as if soothing a child. "You cannot stand that Michael has a new family." "I stood up for his family when I sold my mother's ring for $450 to pay his wedding deposit," I said. "I stood up for his family when I bought diapers and paid rent. Love is not money. Boundaries create respect. Truth always comes to light. Today is that light." Patricia slapped a lid onto the nearest container, defiant. The sound cracked the room. I looked at her hand. "Put it back." She hesitated. The silence stretched. Martha stepped closer to Patricia and took the container out of her hands without a word. She placed it back on the table as if returning a book to a shelf. Hannah's aunt, the host, cleared her throat. "We do not take food before guests have eaten. And we do not insult the person who brought it." Hannah's eyes flashed. "So this is what we do now? We gang up on me? Over printed paper?" I lifted the top page again and read one final line. June 4th, 2025, 6:22 p.m. Hannah. "If she pushes back, we will tell the neighbor she is jealous and confused. Patricia will talk to Mrs. Green first." Mrs. Green, who was refilling coffee, stopped mid-pour and stared at Hannah. The pot trembled in her hand. A brown ring formed on the tablecloth. Hannah's face drained, then flushed scarlet. Michael took a step back as if the floor had shifted. I gathered the pages, squared the edges, and slid them into the envelope. I closed my ledger. I looked at my son. "Choose your place, Michael," I said, not unkindly. "With truth or with theft. There is no third path." He opened his mouth. The old habit, the apologizing silence, moved across his face. Then he looked at Sophia, who was sitting on a folding chair by the wall coloring a paper crown. He closed his mouth again. Patricia hissed, "Do not let her turn you against your wife." I answered for no one but myself. No one turns anyone. People turn themselves. My money is off the table. My name is no longer your shield. Picked up my purse. I left the envelope on the table for all to see. I did not plead. I did not explain. I allowed the evidence to do its work. As I walked toward the door, I heard whispers thread the room. "Shameful. I saw them do it last month. Poor Linda. No, she is not poor, she is clear." The words were dull metal, not weapons exactly, but the tools people use when they begin to build a different story. At the exit, I paused and turned once more to Michael. "If you stay silent again," I repeated, "you are no longer my son." He did not answer. But he did not follow them to the containers either. He went to Sophia, knelt and fixed her paper crown. Outside, the air was cool, clean. I stood on the steps and felt the first quiet drop into place inside me, like a stone finding its bed in a clear stream. Behind me, a voice rose, another answered, chairs scraped, the old order listed. I walked to my car, placed the ledger on the passenger seat, and rested my hands on the wheel. I had not won anything. I had only told the truth out loud, where it could not be bent by whispers. It was enough for that night. The masks had fallen. The rest would follow. The days after the birthday party passed like a storm finally breaking. Silence fell on Michael's house. Neighbors stopped repeating Hannah's stories. The evidence had done its work. Truth does not need volume, only clarity. 3 weeks later, word reached me through Joanne. Hannah had filed for divorce. She left Michael's apartment with Patricia's help, taking nothing but her clothes and her mother's bitterness. In the petition, she cited irreconcilable differences. She did not mention containers, schemes, or betrayal, but I knew what lay between the lines. The mask had shattered, and she needed to escape the shards. Michael came to me pale, thinner than I remembered. His voice was subdued, his eyes hollowed out by sleepless nights. He did not ask for forgiveness. He did not dare. He only asked one question. Can Sophia spend weekends with you? It was not an apology, but it was something real. I agreed without hesitation. The first Saturday, he brought her with a small backpack, her hair in 2 uneven braids. She ran into my arms shouting, "Grandma Linda!" And the weight of years of humiliation fell away. Her tiny hands around my neck were stronger than any promise Michael or Hannah had ever given me. At first, he stayed during those visits, sitting awkwardly in my kitchen while Sophia played. He mumbled about work, about rent, about custody papers. I answered only what was necessary. He had to learn in silence that my boundaries were not temporary. My money was off the table, and that rule would never bend again. Sophia filled my house with laughter. She loved to help me water the garden, though most of the time she ended up soaked herself. She asked questions without end. Why flowers close at night? Why cats sleep so much? Why pancakes are round? Every answer I gave her was honest. I had no more space in my life for lies. The neighbors, who once whispered about my supposed confusion, began to greet me differently. They saw Sophia running to me every weekend, saw Michael carrying bags of toys he had finally paid for himself. The pity in their eyes had changed to something else, respect. I had stood firm when others would have folded. One afternoon, Patricia crossed the street to face me. She did not smirk this time. She only said, "You ruined everything." I looked at her calmly. "No, Patricia. You ruined it yourself. I only showed the truth." She turned away, her shoulders rigid, but she did not answer. Lies wilt under daylight. She had no defense left. Michael's silence slowly cracked. He began to speak more freely, to admit small truths. How Hannah had pressured him to stay quiet, how Patricia had rehearsed lines for him, how he had felt trapped between loyalty and shame. I listened, but I did not comfort. That was his path to walk, not mine to soften. My role now was different. I was not the mother who rescued. I was the grandmother who protected. On the first cold evening of autumn, I sat by the fireplace with Sophia curled against me, her hair smelling faintly of apples from the orchard visit earlier that day. The flames shifted, orange and steady, and I felt a calm I had not known in decades. I no longer waited for apologies from those who betrayed me. I did not expect gratitude for the sacrifices I had made. The years of receipts, the endless nights of doubt, the containers carried out of my kitchen, they belonged to the past, sealed off like an old ledger no one needs to reopen. My new beginning was here. The sound of a child's laughter echoing through my rooms, the quiet certainty that my boundaries were firm, the peace of knowing that love, real love, cannot be bought or stolen. Sophia stirred and looked up at me with drowsy eyes. "Grandma, will you always be here?" I kissed her forehead. "Always," I said. And this time the word carried no weight of money, no burden of sacrifice, only truth. The fire crackled. The garden outside rested in the night. My heart, for the first time in years, rested with it. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. I know it was not an easy journey, but your presence means more than I can say. If this story touched you in any way, let me know in the comments what thoughts it left in your heart. I would be so grateful if you gave this video a like and subscribed, so you never miss the next story waiting to be told. Until then, take care of yourself and remember, even the deepest wounds can heal when shared.